What's going on, guys? Welcome to TK's Garage 405. On today's video, I'm gonna show you something kind of out of the norm for me here. Give you a little once over of a skid steer and kind of things that I look for if I'm buying any sort of equipment and things like that, but more specifically a skid steer like this. So let's get to it. Okay guys, so I'm just gonna tell you, I guess, my personal opinions on things. Everybody has their own opinion and some people might disagree with me, but I'll tell you kind of what I know about machines. I'm pretty familiar with cat machines, kind of what I look for when I'm buying something, depending on the purpose, and kind of, I guess, the general things to look for. So this particular machine is, I believe, a 2012. It's a Caterpillar 297C. You can see back there, it's marked high flow 2-speed. So getting to that kind of stuff here, we'll talk about that a bit later, but I'll give you an idea here of what's going on with this undercarriage. So this particular undercarriage is what so Caterpillar and ASV, basically Caterpillar bought out ASV, and so they started merging companies and sharing some parts. So this would be called like an ASV undercarriage. So this is very common in Caterpillar machines. You see them on, I mean, like multiple different models and makes or whatever. They've been on there for probably 15 years or more by now, maybe even a little bit longer than that. So I really feel like they're a pretty good system. They're easy to work on. I'll tell you some things that people don't like. This is the adjuster for them, very similar. Basically that adjusts the track tension. And so if you don't keep on top of keeping that lubed and you're using it in lots of mud or concrete or things like that, it could be hard to turn that, right? So that's one of the gripes people have. The other one is the wheels, people changing the wheels and stuff. Again, I think it's a good system. If you take care of it and you wash it out regularly and things like that, honestly, these wheels last a very long time. Like this particular machine has 4,300 hours, and I'm sure that's all original. Here's another part of this. They call this like the bird cage. And so over time, these will start to wear out. They would be tight when they're brand new, and as they wear down, they start to just wear out and have a little slack in them. And that doesn't necessarily hurt anything. Sometimes if they get really bad, it could, you know, obviously loosen the tension out of the tracks or whatever. For some reason with this style of track, I don't know, it's like people have the tendency to like grind it against things. You almost like, I mean, I'm gonna say 9 out of 10, even ones with low hours and things, they have like rash along here. Like, I don't understand it. I've run lots of these machines. I don't get why that happens all the time, but it just seems to be a common thing. So I don't really understand that part, but that is a common thing you'll see. They tend to have that. So you'll also notice, like underneath here, there's no holes in the tracks. So typically you'll see a sprocket up here and it'll poke through the track. And so instead of a sprocket wearing out, the bird cage wears out, which again, I think it's a better system in a lot of ways, but there's a time and a place for everything, right? So like, again, these could all be replaced. I think there's some companies, maybe even Caterpillar, that make steel replacements for them, but I think the rubber's fine. The only real complaint I've ever actually heard, like that would be legitimate, was these being rubber. If you were to be like loading gravel all day long and you're turning in the gravel and turning in the gravel and turning in the gravel, like, I mean, I'm talking like, you know, actual, like in a gravel pit or something like that, then I could see that. But other than that, under normal wear and tear, like I said, I'm sure these are original. So that's something to think about there. So if you're buying a track machine, you can see there's 2 plugs here. There's a fill and the drain plug for the final drives. I'm not super well versed on taking them apart and things like that to be rebuilt, but it can be done. There's service manuals, whatever. But If you need to check it, it has to be level. So this would be obviously, that would be the check point. So if it's full up to there, then it's full. If you need to drain it, you get this to the bottom, you drain it out. But if you wanted to check it when you picked it up or something like that, that would be what you do. It's just an Allen key wrench and away you go. I'm gonna be honest, I never have. I just usually if there was some sort of issue, you would see it leaking. So again, that's something to kind of look for. So there's things there. You can see the red handle there. That's the lock to hold up the arm if you're working on it. So if you lifted up the loader. If you look at this particular machine, you can kind of see it's got a little surface rust. Came from a southern state here. So came from down in Florida where I've been at for a little bit here. And sometimes they get surface rust just depending what they use it for. Again, they got a lot of sand down here and things like that, so that's not an uncommon thing to see. It's like I said, it just, that little bit of sand sometimes or whatever gets into things, and if they're not regularly washing it, it's not like a unusual thing. So my personal opinion is, from managing public works for all these years and things like that, you know, that's kind of what I've always done most of my life. When we would buy new equipment, we had lots of cat equipment in our fleet, or whatever it would be, John Deere, Caterpillar, Kubota, whatever it is. Buy like paint from the dealer, and then as you start to get little chips and things like that, just touch it up. Because if it gets to this point and then you try to color match it or something like that, when you could have done it when it was a small little chip, you know, you would hardly see it now. But when it starts getting like that, well, now you're going to really notice it. And I think when you start painting a skid steer, or any machinery for that matter, even though you might think it looks better, it devalues it because it makes it look like you're hiding something. It also doesn't like show the factory color and things like that. It just, people don't do very good paint jobs and stuff like that. So I think that hurts the value a lot, but that's just my opinion on it. Again, everybody's entitled to their own. So this particular machine has a hydraulic quick attach, and that's a common thing to see on Caterpillars. It's actually probably pretty rare to see cats that don't have them. Actually, I don't know if I've ever seen a cat that didn't have it on a skid steer. If anything, maybe the really small ones, but there's just a button in the cab for that and whatever. Okay, so now we're getting into like the 297C. This is a 95 horse machine, so this is like a big skid steer. One thing about that is, like, you get a lot of lifting capacity. I think this thing's rated for like 4,500 pounds. It weighs like over 10,000 pounds, so it's got a lot of rear ballast. As a matter of fact, when I loaded it, you could see I'm ahead of the axle quite a bit, and it actually was still tail happy because there's so much ballast to the rear and the weight and the engine and everything like that. So something to think about when you're loading it. I mean, I could have went farther forward because I got a dually, but I thought I had it pretty balanced, and obviously I should have went another probably half a foot. So this is a high lift model, so you're gonna pretty much get with that with any machine of this horsepower for the most part here. If you were to look at, kind of see where that links up in the back, that's giving you your real good height for lifting. So that's how you're gonna get like basically a machine that can truck load. Bobcats have like a swinging hinge system where it's like a two-piece hinge. So if it's got like a high lift, that would be like a two-piece split system there, basically, where you'll tell it's got like, if you Google it, you could kind of look at the different ones or whatever, but you'll see it's got like a linkage in there, and then it kind of goes, it kind of moves as that arm goes up, so that gives you truck lifting capability. Like, to be totally honest, I've loaded trucks with skid steers before and it sucks. You can't see where you're dumping, and something like this one sits a little bit higher and you're farther away from it, so when it's lifting, it's probably a little bit better. But when you're doing it with like a smaller version of like a rubber tire, or even a track machine that's smaller but that will still lift into a dump truck, you're like have the tendency where it's like barely over top of the edge of the bucket or the dump truck, and then you're spilling it and almost spilling it on yourself. And I just don't like doing it. That's how people break out windows and things like that. So I think if you're going to be buying a skid steer to load trucks, unless it's just a very once in a blue moon thing, you'd be better off with like a small payloader. It's just my opinion. Again, up to you guys. So common attachments here, this set of forks that came with it, that's a super common attachment. Other things to look for here, I guess, before I got away from the track system, if it has like say Caterpillar tracks on it, I don't know if this one does, I can't really see, but if you look at it, usually along here somewhere it'll be stamped, and that'll tell you if it's a Caterpillar it's a Caterpillar track, and they definitely are more durable. So if you were to get like a set of Caterpillar tracks, they're probably $2 more than a set of knockoff tracks from Amazon or something along the lines of that. But you're going to get way better durability and life and things like that out of them. So something to think about if you're buying a track machine. Yeah, so forks, everybody wants forks. That's a common thing for attachment. You always find a use for them. All right, so let's get to the actual machine itself here. So if you look at this machine, so this is a fairly loaded machine. It's got heat and air conditioning. You can see up there, it's got the snail mode, so it's basically creep mode. You can see the HVAC controls there on this machine. That's the throttle. There's all the vents. And then again, you can see there's a foot control down there. So this one has an aftermarket backup camera they put in, which is pretty neat on one like this because it's hard to see behind you. And so if you look at this particular machine, it's a joystick control machine. So pretty much all cats these days are joystick controls, and we would call this style a pilot control, which means the left side is like your loader, you know, up and down dump, and then your right is your, I might have that backwards. I know when I'm sitting in it, I have to think off the top of my head, but so one side basically anyways is the steering and the other side is the tilt, so for the loader. You can see all the connections here, the connections for this setup here. This has got 2 sets of auxiliary hydraulics on it, and it does have the high flow obviously. So high flow is always going to have 3 lines for sure. So this one's actually got, I don't know about that. So this would be like, I guess you could run like an asphalt mulcher, grinder, things like that with it. So this is a big machine, right? So yeah, I'll show you on the inside here a little bit better of what we kind of got going on up here. So you can kind of see there's all these different controls here. It's just basically the quick attach stuff. There's that on the back side here of the pilot. That's where the 2-speed control is. This one has a stereo in it, which is pretty nice. Yeah, this is actually one I sort of bought for myself, but after paying for last week's disaster, I'm gonna sell it. So, but this is kind of one I would like to just buy and keep for myself, to be totally honest. To get one with a full cab, this horsepower, air conditioning, all that kind of stuff, it would do everything I need to do for the rest of my life. So, but again, so this is kind of what I'm talking about with the tracks, and this one has that same problem. I suspect that they flipped it at one point already. It's got a little bit of a tear on the inside, but you can see the outside of there. So as far as I've ever seen, I think the Caterpillar brand of tracks are actually steel belted on the edges, which helps that from happening. This looks like it might be an aftermarket track. I don't know, there's so many different styles, I wouldn't say for sure. But again, so looking at this thing, you can see right here, it's like pitted up a little bit, that kind of stuff. So when I'm hauling them, they always have hooks up here. That's where I chain it to, just my opinion. Again, everybody can do what they want, and that's where I chain it to. So, all right, so what else we got here? Let's go to the engine compartment, see if I can actually get it open here, and then we'll show you guys what's going on with that here. It's pretty tight to get open here, so let's see if I can actually get it open. All right, guys, so back here, you can see this hydraulic filter is all in the back door here. There's backup alarms. There's, oh, what is this here? That looks like it is the overflow for the radiator there. All the plugins for the lights and everything like that. This is a pre-emissions machine, so it doesn't have any of that. This would be a turbo machine. Fuel filter, there's usually a drain on the bottom for a fuel water separator. Air conditioning, compressor. See if you spin that, see, you can spin it. So you know, if you can spin it, that usually the compressor is typically good unless it's leaking. So sometimes it just needs Freon, which I believe is what the case is here. What else we got going on? Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure this is still a Cat engine in these years. The later years, they went to Perkins engines, I believe, and I think that's in the bulk of their machines now. It's been a while since I've bought a brand new machine now, a few years, but that's what they went to for the longest time there, and they're good engines too. I think some of them are actually rebadged Perkins or whatever. They badged them to be a Cat or whatever, but yeah, so the newer Cats, my understanding, at least from, I've got some mechanic friends there that worked for a Cat over the years and things like that. this is an older machine, so wouldn't really have that issue, but on the newer machines, it seems like for whatever reason, well, what they say, again, this is just kind of hearsay from what I kind of gather here, but it does make sense because I see lots of the same situation here. What tends to happen is they make the rings so tight, the piston rings so tight now on these new machines, that they don't really seat like the same as they used to. Like they're trying to get the most efficiency and the least emissions and all this stuff, and so there's just all the tolerance is just so much tighter. And so if you ever go to an auction sale, you go to all the new cats, and honestly it seems more prevalent in cats, even though it doesn't affect the engine performance, but you'll see there'll be like what you'd call a little bit of blow by. So if you open up that lid, there'll be a little bit of air coming out of them. Now if there's like smoke and pressure and things like that, that's different, but most of them, even the ones that have like 1,000 hours now, they'll have air coming out of them. So it just seems to be a common problem. I've seen lots of those particular machines where they've been sold and they've lasted for 10,000 hours. So if you were really concerned, you could pull the air filter here. If you know, check the air filter and see what if it's clean or not and things like that. Kind of gives an idea of maintenance. Diesel oil is always going to be black, so that's not really going to tell you anything, but if you pull it when it's cold, you might be able to see if there was, say, a head gasket issue or something like that. Things like that. So when you start it up, it might puff a little bit of smoke. Even on like a fairly new machine, they'll puff a little when they start, and then as long as it clears up fairly sensibly quick, usually they're pretty solid. So all right, what else there? That's really to show you. This one's a pretty accessible machine here. You can see like the oil filters there. Like this is actually a really nice machine to work on, size wise, and easy to get at. And you can see, like, if you look at it, it's still got the original welds and everything. So this is all the original, probably muffler, things like that. And if it's not, well, then it's probably been changed, and that means they're keeping on top of maintenance, which is good. So I don't see any weird things about it. So we'll go on to the next parts here. Okay, so these cabs are able to be lifted up, and this is pretty much every skid steer ever made, Bobcat, Caterpillar, Takeuchi, whatever it is. The bulk of them can be lifted for access to underneath. This is the cab machine, so you can see there's all the vents and things like that. So that should not be able to be lifted unless the bolts are taken out, but this one did not have the bolts, so that's something to think about. If I hadn't caught that and I towed it forward on the trailer like this, there's a possibility that cab could have blown up on the highway. So something to check all the time if you are buying one before you haul it home. And then you can see it bolts to down there, so it's missing the bolts, which is not a big deal, it just needs to have them put in. So there, it gives you a better look of everything. The battery's over there. The battery's actually, I think it's been replaced in this thing, but I think it's got a bad connection. So, but you can kind of get a visual inspection of everything if there was some hoses replaced or if you needed to replace them. So like if you were going to be working on this thing, you could see how good of access there would be here, right? You could lift up this loader, you could put up the cab, and I mean, you'd have all sorts of access to anything you need here. So it would be like access to all your pressure ports and things like that. I'm not going to speak to all this stuff, like this is your hydraulic tank here, things like that. So this one needs a once over. It's been sitting, that's how I'll sell it. But yeah, it just kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking for over here. So like I said, if you need to boost it, that's where you could boost it from. You could boost it from the back too. There is a port back right above the fuel separator there. You could jump it there as well. You just have to go to ground, and then positive is right there. So something to kind of think about here. So, but yeah, that kind of gives you your serviceability there, and that's kind of, this one's got, I would say, a lot more room to work than the average ones, just because it is a bigger machine, right? So that's something to kind of think about too if you're buying a machine. I mean, you never, you know, I shouldn't say you'll never have too big of a machine, but there is places for everything. Like a machine like this wouldn't be very good for like a backyard, for example. If you're going to do landscaping and you want to be able to get around people's yards, this thing is going to just destroy grass and things like that. But it is bigger and it can lift more and all that kind of stuff. So it's pros and cons. Like, you know, for the average guy, something like a T190 Bobcat, for example, that like, you know, kind of in that neighborhood of size is going to be pretty decent. So I'm going to put this cab back down, but I'll show you here again. There is a lock here. It's a safety lock. So it goes up on that lock. You can see there's a little ball there. So if I push this up, You can kind of see it's sitting right here. It's locked on there, so I'll have to put the camera down, but you can kind of see that's what holds it up there. So that's your safety, so it doesn't fall back down on you. One thing I did kind of miss here, it's got an air ride seat as well, so something to kind of think about there. But yeah, nothing to it. You just get in it, put the arms down, turn the key, let it go through its cycle where it turns all the gauges on and everything. And then as long as it doesn't have glow plugs, then you just fire it up and away she goes. So these new ones are pretty reliable. So you can see this one again. So yeah, you know, to me, cosmetics aren't really that important. This one's missing a couple lights. You can see a couple are beat up in the back. That is not uncommon. You're gonna see that more with a bigger machine, even so, because people back it into things and stuff like that because it's a bigger machine and it's hard to see. And I mean, honestly, there's not that many amazing operators around. So this particular one's missing the door. If you look at Bobcats, the ones that do have like heat and air conditioning typically are missing the door as well. So again, that's something to kind of think about there. But yeah, so that's kind of the bulk of it there. The other thing I'm going to kind of talk about here is if you're looking at a high flow machine, I think people get it twisted up a lot. Again, I'll just kind of give you my personal opinion on this and what the whole idea is behind high flow stuff. Okay guys, so if you've ever looked at a high flow machine, you would see like a big machine like this typically, depending on the purpose. So I guess I'll kind of talk about what my opinion is here. Most people don't need a high flow machine. If you're going to run a bush hog with it, if you buy a standard flow bush hog, just for example, if you were to buy like a kind of off-brand 6-foot bush hog for a skid steer like this, you could probably get one of those for $1,000. You wouldn't need high flow for that. If you were going to get a high flow one, the same one would probably be $3,000 to $4,000 in a high flow. Now, people get confused there because they think that you need high flow for everything, and I think that's a big misconception. There is some pros and cons to it, but like a machine like this, for example, a lot of people are like, well, I want high flow because I want to run a mulcher or like some really high impact things. Well, to be completely honest, this one's going to do a better job than like a smaller one at cooling the hydraulic oil. But if you were to ever look at, say, like a Terex machine, they'll have like a cooler on the top, for example, and those would be like what you'd call like a forestry package or whatever. And those ones are particularly designed for that because I've seen this lots, you know, operators will run them and they'll be like, oh, I'm getting an alarm for overheating, like hot oil basically for the hydraulics. And it gets the oil so hot, it's basically boiling the oil because it doesn't have enough cooling capacity because it's moving that oil so fast. So you can see on this particular machine, the cooler, I think this one, yeah, I believe it's up here on this one. Let's take a look here. Anyways, I think, I can't see. Typically they're sandwiched in here though. Underneath the, like a lot of times it'll be the radiator and then underneath that's the cooler, or else they'll be in the back door. That's kind of the two places they put them. But either way, they just don't have enough airflow and cooling capacity to keep that oil cool. So like, it's not like if you were to buy this machine and you were planning on running it with a high flow attachment all day long, it's going to be the right solution necessarily. I personally think like where a machine like this would be maybe okay-ish, if you were a small contractor, for example, and you lived in a northern state or even like Canada or something like that, high flow machine here. If you had a truck loading snowblower or something like that, you know, that would be probably, you know, a little bit cooler in the wintertime and things like that up there. I mean, it's pretty cold, so the oil's not going to get quite as hot. That's a decent solution. Summertime, I've seen it in Canada where these things will boil the oil just running a small bush hog or whatever, right? So there's just things like that to think about that a lot of average people don't think about. And I think if you're looking for a machine, like I said, if you got a T190, that's a, you know, you have a 13 gallon a minute bush hog. I mean, you could bush hog stuff like this all day long, you know, just taking it easy and not pushing it and not being in a rush or whatever. But again, if you're going to be doing that and you're trying to do it like, say, commercially or whatever, I mean, that's not the machine for you, and this wouldn't be the machine for you either. Then you'd be stepping up, right? So running like mulchers and things like that, those things are going to make an incredible amount of heat on the, you know, on the grinders and things like that. That's probably typically what people buy machines like this for as well, to run those like asphalt grinders. And the same thing, those take a lot, you know, a lot of heat created by running those types of attachments. So, you know, there's going to be people that are probably going to say, well, yeah, you can run that and it'll handle it because I had one and we did it like that. Yeah, but you know what? You're wearing out your hydraulics, you're wearing out your oil, you're wearing out everything on the machine, and honestly, it's just hard on things. So it's, if you're going to buy it, there's a specific purpose. But this one, again, like I said, a bigger machine like this is going to have a bigger cooler, so it's going to do a better job than like a smaller one. But you know, people think too, like, I'm going to buy a high flow machine, and people like ask that all the time. If you were to sell a machine and you're like, hey, it's like I keep saying a T190 because that's a common machine size wise. So that's like a 66 horsepower machine. So it's not going to have enough power to make a difference with high flow or low flow anyways. Like, it just doesn't have enough horsepower, right? So they do kind of measure the actual capacity and horsepower on the flow too. So something like this is going to have way more power to the high flow than obviously, like, you know, a 66 horsepower engine in another machine versus this. It's just going to have way more. So there's going to be a huge difference there too. So again, it just depends on what you're looking for, but I would say 9 times out of 10 for the average user, you're not gonna need the high flow. People ask a lot, they want pilot controls these days, which it's whatever, it's each to their own. I can run anything here. A lot of machines still are foot controls, more of the budget machines. There is some benefits to that. There's less problems, right? If you were to have issues like these joysticks when they start leaking, I think those are about $4,000 each, if I remember right, or maybe the pair, I forget, but it's significant. Foot control machines, I mean, it's almost unheard of to hear problems with them because they're linkages, right? There's other ones like case controls where they have a different pattern. Some people don't like those. You could switch the hoses if you want it to be like pilot controls or whatever. There's options for that, but that's something to think about. Again, I don't know. To me, I can run them all, so it doesn't really affect one way or the other. Gal has machines that they call like a T-bar. So Gal kind of got a bad reputation, even though I think, in my personal opinion, they actually make a decent machine these days, but they kind of got a bad rap in the probably like the late 80s, early 90s. They actually had what was a T-bar, and so right in the middle between your legs there's one bar, and that was forward reverse, and you had to twist it with your one hand to actually get it to steer, which was kind of a terrible system. It was stupid because it was right in the middle, so you were reaching over, so that gave them a bad reputation. But now people are still calling them T-bars, and they actually have 2 handles, which is pilot controls, but it's an inverted handle, so it's like a 90-degree handle instead, which actually works pretty good too. So, but yeah, like kind of some things that I've seen over the years is, you know, they'll start to tend to crack in certain places like that. I've missed them on machines. I actually sold a machine I had an issue with a guy on that I just didn't see it. I had actually bought a machine, this is a few years back now. I had bought a machine, I traded it back to a different guy, or a guy that I bought it, I took it back on trade from him. He hardly put any time on or whatever, so I took it back, and it was winter time, so I didn't wash it or anything. And it probably was like that before I even sold it to that guy, but there was like some cracks, like I think, at least according to him, somewhere up by, you know, like the pins and things like that. So I don't remember exactly where, but this is kind of the areas to check. I look more in depth at things now because of situations like that, but you know, just to kind of look, and you can see these, I mean, just look at the size of the metal here. These things are just built way beefier, so you get a bigger machine, it's just going to be built heavier, right? So this is going to last way longer. Other things just to say, I guess, would be like, you know, if you're owning it, grease it every day, things like that. I mean, grease is cheap. The pins and bushings and everything like that will last way longer if you do keep on top of like keeping it lubed up and greased and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of the bulk of it anyways. Like I said, this thing would need a door if you wanted to have the heat and air conditioning and be nice and sealed up or whatever, but it is nice to have it, even though, you know, if you were to buy one and you could get the option of having it, it's definitely nicer to have it and then be able to fix it later than not having it and having to trade it in because it's too hot or too cold or whatever to use it. So, but like I said, so that's the kind of things to look at. If you were to like pick up the bucket here, you'll see sometimes the first place that they'll wear when you tip it, they'll actually wear on the pins that hold the attachment on. So, and that's not a big deal. That's going to be where they always wear first. Typically it'll wear on the attachment first, and then it'll start to wear the pin second. Again, neither are a big deal, but if you press down and you start to see like really excessive play in there, that means that those pins are wearing out, and hopefully they haven't worn into the bushings yet. So you can knock it out, you could put a new pin and bushing in, and away you go, and it'll be tight again. But if you let it go too far and it wears out the metal, then you have problems. So again, and you know what, like some of those machines for the right price, it's not really that big of a deal. Like, you know, it's, you know, I think people a lot of times they want to have like a machine that's, you know, a machine that would cost $30,000, but they want to be able to buy it for 10,000 and things like that. And that's just not realistic. If you're going to buy a machine under 20 grand, you're probably going to have to do some work to it, and it's probably not going to be perfect. You might have to do a little bit of welding and fixing and replacing some pins and bushings, wheels and idlers and things like that. I mean, that's just kind of part of owning this type of stuff. So if you don't want to have to deal with like doing those types of repairs, then you should probably be buying a new machine. You know, go to the dealer, buy a new machine, take care of it how you take care of it, and then it'll last you as long as it lasts you, right? So, but otherwise, like I said, I mean, honestly, I think brand wise, you know, Cat is at the top of the pile here or whatever, but there's some decent machines, and there's some that are specific to the machines too. It's not necessarily always brand, but Caterpillar always makes pretty decent quality stuff. Definitely pre-emission stuff like this one is going to last a lot longer and have a lot less problems, so that's something to think about as well. All right guys, so I know that kind of dragged on a little bit there. Sometimes I ramble a little bit because I get thinking, because I forget things along the way, but that gives you kind of the idea of what I look for when I'm buying something. So like I said, it's just not everybody knows this type of stuff, and you know, I forget sometimes. I'll be totally honest. If I go look at something I just want or like or whatever, I just forget to check things, or sometimes I just think, if it has to be fixed or whatever, I just fix it. And so yeah, I don't have a shop anymore, so I don't really haven't bought too much of this stuff to fix, because I don't have a shop anymore to work on and tinker in and things like that. So I've kind of gotten away from that, but I do have a whole bunch of trees that need to be cleared out. Like I said, I really kind of want to keep this machine, but we'll see. But it kind of gives you an idea, like I said, of a once over of what kind of maintenance, what sort of things to look for when you're looking at these machines, and kind of a once over of everything there. So thanks for watching again, guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, share me around on social media, TK's Garage 405 on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.